Yep, there we are.
All right.
Okay. Okay, Greens, it is 4 o'clock or slightly after on May the 6th, 2021. And this is one of the first Utilities Committee meetings that is being monitored by our new administrator, David on Lumsden. And he's managing these documents. As you see here up on the screen now is the agenda. And let's start it off then with the establishment of that there is in fact a quorum, and in fact we have everyone on the committee. There's Alan and Marilyn and myself. And pardon me a minute here while I try to adjust this screen. Because I'm hiding on part of what I need to see. Okay, there we go. Okay, to lead off with the agenda, then let's approve the minutes of the February 11th committee meeting. I assume that by now everyone has read that, and all corrections that were offered have been applied, and I hope that it's now history.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I was going to say that, Michael. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the minutes are approved as written. Okay, let's lead off with a favorite subject, and that is the directive from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, termed a CMOM, which is a rather elaborate guide to help us identify the inflow and infiltration of groundwater into our wastewater system. And because we have for some time been dealing with excesses, they have given us a order to correct it or be penalized. And David, if you would, could you go put that first slide on? There we are. No, top one should be the top one.
1 second. Here we are.
There we are.
Just to break in here, just to clarify what I think is the situation. We are under a consent order from the Ohio EPA to essentially avoid overflows at our sewage treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
And we report on a monthly basis on our progress in that regard, or the situation. We give them situation reports, which is to say comparison of rainfall and how, when, and if we have overflows. And while occasionally we do have overflows, like virtually every other utility in the state, so far the EPA is satisfied with the progress we're making towards eliminating them, and we are continuing to do that. And the CMOM is one tool that will help us reduce the incidence of overflows. So yes, they have suggested that definitely want us to do the CMOM, but the point is what they really want, it's all towards the goal of reducing and eventually eliminating the overflows.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, wasn't there a grant application that council had authorized at least to be applied for, which we should have received a decision by the end of January or February? I can't remember now. And what is the status of that grant application? Did we receive a response?
So it was not a grant, but rather a 0% interest loan towards the first stage of the CMOM process. The CMOM takes place in 3 stages. You start with the planning, then you go to design, and then construction. And what is evaluated in one stage influences what you do in following stages. So for instance, the planning stage, where we're currently operating right now, we received approximately a $90,000 0% loan over the next, let me find here, it looks like 6 years to pursue planning steps, to evaluate what our system currently looks like, how it currently operates, and highlight potential areas for attention and improvement. And I'll go through the steps that have been taken so far on the planning stage. Then once planning has completed, we'll begin design. If there are any construction projects that are identified to address inflow and infiltration through the planning stage, we'll address those with the design and construction stages. And those will require either financing through low interest loans or depending on the cost, potentially even direct payment just from the village to contractors for that work, whatever it may be.
So the loan that we had applied for this towards the end of 2020 and the beginning of this year was approved and how much was that loan?
Loan is I believe it's 89.8, so nearly $90,000 at 0%.
David, is that loan itemized on the Glendale website now with the chart that you put up?
It is. It is OWDA 9222. Is that loan's sort of identifying number? It's listed as the CMOM planning loan.
Okay, so it is available for us to look at, Maryland, of course, and obviously the residents of the village. So it has a complete listing of current loans, which is a big step forward, I think.
Well, that's good news. Okay, and so and David, you've identified that money is to be used for planning purposes, and you will go through that at some point? Yes.
Whenever we'd like to undertake that little part of today's meeting, I'd be happy to go through where we are currently.
Jeff, do you want him to do that now, or you want to hold off on that?
I think one quick thing I would inquire about, and then let's defer the rest of it. But have we any timeline at all, David, established for this?
Yes. So I will go through the different stages that we're in currently to identify where we are in the planning process. So the first part is something that Kevin Bell, the utility superintendent, is undertaking along with our engineering firm, EES. And that is a complete summary of all of the details of our utility operation. EES put together other CMOM documentation from other communities as examples of what's included in these reports. Kevin is updating those reports to provide that information to the EPA as part of the planning loan process. That's things like number of staff, capacity, testing schedules, so on and so forth, baseline data. The second part, and what we're beginning this summer, we have contracted with the Great Lakes Community Action Partnership, and they operate a program known as the Rural Community Assistance Program. It helps communities throughout the Midwest, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, to identify issues and steps with local utilities such as ours. The service that they will be providing is GIS, and that's the online mapping system locating of our existing water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. So this summer, in late June and early July, Kevin and his crew will be marking our existing utilities. So you'll be seeing quite a bit of paint out in the streets of Glendale as we mark those utilities in preparation for the Rural Community Assistance Program to come out with GIS locating equipment and prepare for us a digital map of all underground utilities, water, sewer, and stormwater in the village of Glendale. This tool is actually going to be very helpful for a number of reasons. Not only does it consolidate all of the large scale paper maps that we currently use to identify utility locations, it's accurate down to the ½ inch. So we will have a laser focused location for our utilities, including valves, meters, manholes, catch basins, every part of the utility. And then it also allows us to report information into it to provide summaries of things like hydrant flushing, which is something that's going on in the village right now, as well as water main breaks, and helps us visualize where water main breaks are taking place throughout the village and where they have taken place previously, and puts that all on an online mapping tool that is very easy to view and follow and keep track of where our utilities are and things that are occurring with them.
Yeah, and that would start this summer, you stated, and any idea how long it may take?
So they work very quickly. They don't like to stay in a community too long. It really costs them because they do travel over a pretty large area of the country. So we anticipate that we'll have a deliverable product sometime by mid to late July, depending on how complicated the information that they are collecting and putting into the system ends up being. But we'll have something by the end of the summer, at the absolute latest.
That's great,
Okay.
I think.
And you were saying the second stage, and what's the third stage?
Of the whole CMOM process?
Yes.
Yeah, it's design, or I'm sorry, it's planning, design, and then construction.
So they would use the data that is provided to begin planning for whatever construction is necessary.
Correct, and they would use that data to identify potential areas for further attention. And then once that data is collected, then we can proceed and instead of wandering around trying to find where problems might be, we will have a visual representation of where our utilities are and where we might have issues and where we can focus time and energy. So it'll be a good starting point for this process.
Okay.
And phase 3 is stage 3 is planning, design, and construction.
Those are the 3 stages. So the first of 3 is planning.
Okay.
Then the second of 3 is design, and then the third of 3 is construction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If you might refer to the chart on the screen there, it's that one is a little confusing, but it overlays the 4 years on the chart, and the full lines going from January to December are a full year. I think it's a brown line, it should be, which is the very short line starting in the January is 2021. That's the color code there, I guess. But it does compare each year overlaid one upon the other. And you can see that they're fairly consistent at this time of the year. They're all pretty crowded in there. And David, if you scroll down, please, to the next one, and we've used these charts before. This is just extending the same data out over one continuous stream. And you can see that on the extreme right, as we look at it, that is January through April of this year, there was a peak again in March. I guess that's when we had all that rain. And it has dropped down considerably. Yep. And you'll scroll down, I think one more, please, David.
Surely.
That's it there.
Oh, no, that's it.
That's it, yeah. Sorry.
Don't want to spoil it.
Yeah. So there are a lot of peaks and valleys, and of course the directive to us is to reduce or eliminate those, which is the stormwater in the entering our sewer system. Any comments, any other questions that we want to address here on this topic? No? Okay.
Just to be clear, so I understand it.
Mhm.
This is a measure of the total wastewater in our system that reaches our plant.
That's correct.
And you're saying it includes I&I.
That's
Because it
correct.
has to, because we have no idea how much, we don't really know how much I&I there is.
No.
Right,
Yes, that's correct, Don.
okay,
That is the total production or
right.
throughput, if you will.
Okay.
Okay, then if there are no further questions regarding the process, then let's move on to the next topic,
Jeff,
which, yes,
Jeff, yes, I do have a question. I'm looking at this chart. In the month of May of 2020, when we had that heavy rainfall, oh, I
Yes.
see, there is a spike.
yes.
Yes.
It is up to 300, and it's up to almost 400 million gallons.
Okay, and in the month of, what was that, February or early March,
Yes.
we had another spike.
Yes.
Was
That's
that
all
also-
spring of last year. Or I guess that's,
Spring of this year.
yeah,
This year.
2019.
Was that also a heavy rainfall associated with that? Does anyone recall?
Yes, I think each one of these spikes reflects heavy rainfall.
Yes.
Thank you. Mhm.
Well, the other thing I would take from this chart is that we have made some progress
Yes,
in reducing I&I, because you just look at the difference between 2018 and then 2019 and 20. And there was a beginning in about July of 18, there was a very big, increase, probably some major leak or something in our system that hopefully we were able to fix and bring the number back into line with what it's become.
Jeff, what's the capacity of our plant?
what is the capacity?
Capacity to handle sewage?
Rather than make an educated guess, perhaps, David, do you have a clue? I'm
Oh, I wish.
round.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I can get that and refer back to the committee.
Just,
Thank
yeah. I mean, with that, you could put if it's 20 million gallons, you could say, well, everything above 20 million is excess, that it's bypassing the system theoretically, I guess.
I think the capacity of the plant to produce water is somewhere around 1 million a day. We'll look at that. In fact, if you'll scroll down to the next chart, I think, David, please,
Surely.
that looks at water production. And
Wastewater, aren't we still on wastewater?
no, this is water production. That was the inquiry about oh, I'm sorry, Michael, were you asking about the wastewater? or what?
Wastewater. So, I mean, if the capacity is 1 million a day of making water, I guess you would assume we're treating a little more than that, because residents are adding their own fluids to it. So it's probably for 30 days, we're probably talking about 30 to 35 million gallons that we probably have to treat in theory. I'm just making an assumption, that's all.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I thought it was like 3 million a day for capacity for the wastewater, but
I have a message to Kevin Bell to confirm that number, but that is my recollection. But I will, I'll get a number from Kevin and let you know.
yeah.
So if we go back to the previous slide, Jeff, for a moment, I want to follow what Mike Bogran was speaking of. So here we're looking at wastewater by month. And I understood Mike's question to ask what is our capacity of treating wastewater, and to suggest if we had a horizontal dark line at that capacity limit, then any peak above or below that would be a visual that it was beyond our capacity or much below our capacity. Is that where you were going with that, Mike?
Yes, Marilyn. Yep. I think
Okay.
Well,
It would- it
I'm
would-
wondering, and this is another question maybe for Kevin, whether these numbers capture the wastewater that is an overflow, because that doesn't really reach our plant. That goes, unfortunately, it goes straight into the creek. So
Right.
unless we have a way of measuring it before it overflows, what we're really, this is the water that we receive to be treated.
That we treat.
So by definition, it would be within the capacity of the plant.
good point. So I guess we need Kevin's knowledge to educate us, I guess. Yep.
I think so too, because and that should be clear, Jeff, if I may ask, if this is treated wastewater or if this is wastewater coming into the system.
Yep.
This is all wastewater, including the I&I, correct? Except that which overflows.
It is, it's all the wastewater, including I&I, that gets treated at the plant. But there's some wastewater, every now and then, we have a heavy rain, and it causes the water to overflow, the wastewater to overflow before it can be treated. That's why the EPA doesn't like it very much.
So to follow that question then, Don, so we have no idea how much water overflows our sewer treatment plant then?
Now, and so that's not true. We measure overflows, and I do think that when we report to EPA, we have to report all of our overflows to the EPA. I don't know how accurate but my recollection is that yes, we do have some measure of how much water overflows into Town Creek.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Kevin's the manager on this information, so.
And I'm making note of the different questions here, and we'll follow up later on with an email once I have a chance to talk with Kevin.
Thank you. These charts are good, but we just need to know more of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And thank you. And so now if you go to the next chart.
Okay.
If I may, just one more thing. I think the critical thing that I always look for in the reports is the trend, and what I have seen is a really marked decline in overflows at the plant, both in the number and the volume. And that's why the EPA is not breathing down our neck right now, because they see that we are making progress and that we are getting better at controlling and preventing overflows. I'm sorry, Marilyn, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
If you scroll back to the one chart, please, David, there, confirming what you were saying, Don. If you look at the brown line for 2021, it's below the previous years.
Correct.
Correct.
So we are making progress there. Yes. Okay, if we may, please, David, move down to the next screen, which is the average daily water production. Okay. The lines I hope are pretty much self-explanatory. This is the average daily production from the water plant for the March and April of this year. We don't have January and February that would be accurate because that was while we were replacing the main, and we had loss from applying the new fittings to the pipe, and as well as some brakes. But you can see that the production in blue, which is March, is higher than the production in April, the brown line. And so the point there is that we are pumping less water in that 2-month period by a fair amount. The horizontal, I'm looking here, the horizontal green line, I guess the upper green line is the average for March. The lower green line is orange line is the average for April. And so you can see there's an improvement in the fact that we are pumping less water. That means that the leak in the container is smaller. We don't need to produce as much water every day just to keep the container, that is the water tower, I guess, to keep it full. And that difference is about 66,000 gallons per day. And that's significant in terms of our water loss. We can't predict that far ahead that this is going to hold true. And that's why we were looking at waiting for 2 or 3 meter readings relative to billing. But we do know, regardless of billing, that we don't have to pump as much water each day as we were prior to the main being installed completely in the 1st of March. Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a good summary.
Yeah, while I was speaking here, I was thinking I probably should have drawn a single 2-month long line. It would be a little easier to understand. I'll try to make that a little better next time.
So it's encouraging. The bottom line, it's encouraging.
Yeah.
Good news.
Both lines are, yeah, it's an improvement, and both are an improvement over the previous year. Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, if you'll scroll down, please, David. The next topic being basically to talk about, well, let's stay with the displacement for a moment, please, going back to that. Our objective, our target, as we've talked about in previous meetings, is to reduce the water flow, the water losses to an acceptable 15 to 20% by the end of 2024. And there is progress made because we have replaced the main, and several leaks. One, for example, at Cleveland and Troy, a leak that was known for a number of months, if not a year, was replaced, was fixed. That repair was delayed because of the impending replacement of the pipe there. So when that was completed, that leak has been taken care of. So we're making progress there. But we have talked about, and David, you somewhat addressed it in your points there, that the Water Association will be coming to help us identify leaks as well as the sewer issues.
Yes, that's a very good summation that Kevin is working with the Ohio Rural Water Authority on an ongoing basis to identify leaks in our system. They have very sensitive testing equipment, sound testing equipment that Kevin utilizes to identify areas where there are leaks potentially. And then we can investigate having them repaired or potential interior main replacement, depending on the severity or location.
Yeah, I think I use on the agenda there, I use the phrase ground penetrating radar. I don't know if that's the same product or concept, but that's what I thought the term was. Yeah, that will certainly go a long way to identifying some of the smaller leaks. And even though we're making headway with the replacement of the main and replacement of some other leaks. And by the way, if I may, we had in the last year 5 leaks on Sharon, which now should not occur. We spent $25,000 approximately. It's about $5,000 per repair to make those repairs in 2020 and early this year. That $25,000 we won't have to spend again, so that will be $25,000 that should show up in a positive way on our budget. One of the things we had asked for in previous meetings was to set a goal and implement an action plan, if you will. I know that, David, you've listed things that are going to be done relative to Rural Water Association, et cetera. But there remains the statement from the engineers that one of the possible causes of our water losses are the water meters. And I'd like to simply touch on that topic again in this meeting. I know we've discussed it before, but it's something that's we're ultimately going to have to do. They are now 16, 17 years old. I think we were told in one of the meetings they were good for 10 years, and then we were subsequently told that we'd want.
The meters are good for 15 to 20 years, and my understanding is that they are coming up on 15. So they are good for about 15 years.
Okay.
At least 15, if not 20.
Yes.
Okay, I won't get it. That's fine. In a couple of the conversations, it has been they would be pretty much near the end of their life by 15. And I think that Wally had said that we were at 15 or 16 last year. Regardless, we ultimately have to address that issue. And there are benefits to it that can be realized through the fact that we don't have to basically manually do meter reading. And although there is a long-term payout, there is in fact a payout for it because we spend $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and that's a conservative estimate, simply to manually read the meters. And so there are there's costs, there are benefits, and we need to keep that on the table.
Yeah, let me add, as far as costs of reading meters, those are included in the current salaries of water and sewer department employees.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
So Jeff, I have a question. When you speak of replacing meters that are 10, 15 years old, who bears that expense, the village or the homeowner or property owner?
I believe that's a village expense.
So the property owner, and this is a detail I want to clarify with our engineers as we look into this project into the future, is that homeowners purchase water meters. And the village would need to determine if it would pay to, because if there's, for instance, if there's a new home construction in the village, we've had several of those recently, that, or if a homeowner purchases a meter to install to measure their landscaping system, for instance, they purchase that meter. It remains property of the village, but they purchase that meter. So the cost would be on the village to procure the meters and replace them. And then we would go forward determining if there's any costs associated with recouping those for replacing those meters. But I would want to clarify with our engineers the exact details of that process when we get closer to implementing it.
I'd like to hear the results of that, because I had thought that the rule was the homeowner pays for the first meter when they build a house and they put the meter in there.
And that might be more accurate, yes.
And the village pays for replacements thereafter, largely because we want the meters to remain high quality, and we don't want a lot of homeowners telling us, well, I don't want to buy a new meter now, I like the one I have. Well, the reality is, as Jeff is kind of alluding to, as meters get older, at some point when they start to give out, they read slower. And we did test randomly selected 12 meters in the village and found there was no slow reading going on. You know, the recommendation from the testing company was that your meters are still doing the job.
Okay, my understanding, of course, would be that as a resident, that if the village was going to replace a water meter, I will have paid for that through my
yes,
water fee.
And the mayor's interpretation is more accurate than mine. So I would, but I would want to get more information from our engineers as we proceed with that process.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would ask that we be crystal clear in who's paying and who's to be expensed for the cost.
Absolutely.
Kevin has inquired of 3 potential vendors, and it's on a very preliminary basic request. And it looks like it's about $400,000 to replace the meters. That would be including the equipment, the software to read the meters remotely, the installation, etc. So with 1,000 residents, we're talking about what, $400 per household. The thing about it, one of the things about it is that, of course, ultimately we have to do it. And you can't, as I understand it, install half dozen meters of one kind and then continue, let's say, installing half a dozen remote read meters and then install half a dozen or a dozen more later. It has to be done all at once. And so it is a cost that the village is, the enterprise, excuse me. And let's clarify that so anyone listening understands it's not a quote village expense in terms of taxpayer money. It is the enterprise money. And as far as testing is concerned, I can't talk to Alan and Marilyn together collectively and that would be a committee, so we do it publicly. And that is, I still think that we should pursue an extended test of meters. As I understood it, the original plan was that we would buy 12, install them, test the old ones, and then if the old ones were good, install them someplace else in another 12 homes and pull those meters out and test those. So that ultimately you get a statistically correct evaluation, because I don't know, and Alan, you might confirm, if you've got 1,000 parts at the plant, and you pull 2 of them or a dozen of them and say, well, these are good, so they're all good. I don't know if that's particularly a significant test. And as we approach and need to replace these, we ought to find out about it sooner than later, because it is cost justified.
So I want to provide some clarity there too. When meters are tested, they are pooled and a replacement meter is installed. The replacement meter becomes the new meter for that property.
Right.
Once it's tested, that other meter is either saved for parts if we need it or discarded. We do not replace with previously used meters. If we pull a meter for testing, we replace it with a new meter. So that ultimately, including staff hours, comes to anywhere from about $1,000 to $1,500 per meter that we would test.
Okay. And so it would cost us $15,000 to test 15 more devices.
Correct.
I understand you're the boss, but I am dubious that a 1% test is statistically accurate.
I agree.
We regularly test around at least 8 to 10% of parts for a reading for ISO. So that's
Yeah, for
Well,
a high
we will-
confidence level, you gotta do more than 10%. Yeah.
We will proceed with additional testing as time goes on. But it would ultimately be if any of the meters were to come back outside of specifications, and according to the testing company that we use to evaluate our meters, that based on the size of our utility and our user base, that 12 is a sufficient number to identify whether or not there is a potential problem or delay or slowdown, I guess, in our meters. But we will continue with testing as time goes on, because Jeff, you're absolutely right, and the committee's right, that meters are reaching the end of their lifespan, and it's something that we know we're going to have to deal with. We would, of course, prefer to put off an expense like that, a $500,000 expense like that, as much as possible. And when we start receiving results that indicate we have a potentially widespread problem, we'll certainly address that.
Very well. Any comments, questions before we move on?
One comment, and I heard accurately, I think, that you can't have different types of meters within one system. That doesn't sound right to me. And I would like to see if there's some more investigation possible. It seems to me that you'd be able to have, one neighborhood can be fully electronic remote read, another neighborhood not. I wonder if there could be 2 systems within one village. And here's why I asked the question. It sounds like it's $1,000 to take out and test a meter, where it's only $400 to install a new remote read meter. So if there were a way to slowly rotate out over time and keep some meters with the old system and have other meters with this new system, that would be the way to do it. And instead of doing any testing, you would just start to rotate out 50, 100 a year until you were done. I would urge you to ask more questions as to whether we can run 2 systems. It may be a bit of a headache, but I don't know why you couldn't.
I think, Michael, and I perhaps phrased that incorrectly, that you probably could do it. The issue is that you have to buy the core software and processing power and equipment to accommodate one device as well as 1,000. So you've got a pretty big investment just to get one installed.
Just to get the core started, sure, yeah. Okay.
But that makes sense, though. If it's that expensive to test it, why not just put a new one in?
Yeah, so let's evaluate what that would be. Is it $100,000 for the new equipment and then 300 per meter or something? But let's evaluate what that is. Maybe there's a plan we can build around that.
Okay. Good comment. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll scroll down, please, then David. The next chart is simply illustrates the two enterprise revenue streams. And going back to January of last year, you can see the quarterly billing of each quarter for each department. And that's provided simply to give you an illustration. There's nothing particularly revealing about it. Because sewer charges more than production of water, obviously it generates more revenue each quarter. If you'll scroll down, please, David. Okay, as a result of the previous screen there where we're generating money, here's what's happening in the enterprise fund balances. It's interesting that if you will look, does that scroll down a bit further, David, or do I? Is there not a date? Yeah, go down if you can, or will it fit? There we are. This is from December 31st of last year. The fund balance was $1,288,000. And as of April 30th, the fund balance was $1,590,000. And that, I think I said on the agenda, that's an improvement. That is, the balance has increased by $372,000 in the last 4 months. It is a number larger than I think we anticipated as a utility committee, larger than we anticipated achieving as a utility committee meeting back in October of 2019. And this number of rounding at 1.6 million is a balance after we have paid in January a $300,000 against our debt. So we've got a fairly sizable balance in the enterprise funds.
Jeff, I cannot see the, can you enlarge that visual, David, please? So
I can enlarge it without losing the dates.
Okay, so, and it's the dates I'm trying to follow. The 1.3 mil, what month is that ending in?
That's December 31st, January 1, first day of the year.
Okay.
I'm really having trouble following the dates down below.
So it looks like the graph, this first is the end of year 2018, end of year 2019, end of year 2020, and then we jump to a monthly scale for end of January 2021, end of February 2021, end of March 2021, and then I'm assuming end of April 2021.
Okay, that's more like what I'm, but I couldn't make any sense out of it, really. My
Right.
dates were all kind of crunched together at the bottom.
Do you have the original spreadsheet, David, where you can enlarge that chart,
That I will
make
do
it wider to spread it out? If not, it's okay.
No, I can't change.
Okay.
I can only discuss.
All right, it's a PDF. Yeah. Okay.
I guess one question that comes to mind is whether the enterprise fund balances includes the loan proceeds, the proceeds on loans that we have received. And so, I mean, if
It would not, because loan proceeds, we do not, for what payments made on the village's behalf to organizations, to contractors through the OWDA are only booked. This appears to be, is this, Jeff, Mike, is this based on the Fifth Third balance?
Yep. Yeah. That's
So this
just,
is the actual bank balance.
okay,
Now the one thing I would point out, and
from the OWP.
what was that, Mike?
The loan payments go directly from the Ohio Department to whoever the contractor is. It doesn't pass through us.
It doesn't pass through our bank. We do
Right.
book it to keep track of those payments, but
Right.
we don't.
We book the debt.
Yes, but we don't see the dollars.
We don't see the dollars. Okay.
The one thing I would point out too is that the last 4 points are, it goes from an annual scale to a monthly scale. So we're looking at end of year balances, and then it jumps into April. So although it does increase drastically from the end of March to the end of April, it does show that the end of the year ends at anywhere from 2.8 to, or 2.1 or 1.2, sorry, to 1.3.
So the comparison is really, say, for instance, March 31, 2021, but we do not have March 31, 2020.
Correct.
Do you have March for any of those years, or are those all year end?
I think that I've got a screw up in the chart, and I apologize. Either
That's
that
year
or,
end. That's year end. Year end.
yeah,
Okay.
That's end of January.
And that one's January. Okay,
January, February.
March, April.
April.
So we would want to see year end to draw a true comparison. Or,
Right.
as Marilyn suggested, look at March and April of the prior years. Is there any reason though, David, why the fund balance would increase? Isn't there a typical amount of water that's used every month? Well, I guess summer's more.
Summer's more. Between end of March and end of April is a billing month. So we receive a tremendous amount of money throughout the month of April. I don't have the exact billing amount or receipts amount yet. But we do have a receipt on the water, and this includes both water and sewer. So those receipts for that April billing are included in that bank balance.
Do you anticipate that we will run deficits at any time during this coming year?
So based on the spreadsheets that were provided to council during the budget process, we anticipate from 2020 end of year balances to estimated 2021 end of year balances, deficits of about 80,000 in water and 20,000 in sewer.
80 and 20, so that would knock us down 100, but we'd still be ahead of year end, of any other year end shown here.
yeah, I mean, so you see, you guys see the slope there from the last 2 data points that you see. That slope is going to increase in the next quarter and the following quarter, just basically because people are going to use a lot more water this following quarter and then the next quarter. So the slope is going to increase even more than what we currently have.
That's
I mean,
what
I
I'm
track
guessing
cash
too,
flow.
Mike.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
wondering
that's-
if we have more
that's-
than enough fund balance now.
Well, that's independent of expenses.
Yeah. Well-
That assumes we don't spend any money.
Well,
That would slope upward. So
no, yeah. No, not exactly. I'm tracking it on cash flow year to year, month to month, based on what we've had in the past, based on where we are today and where we're going, assuming that there's no 50 and above capital expenditures for the year in enterprise. So
Right.
if we paint the water tower this year and we spent 300,000, so that'll flatten out. But
Right.
and that's one of the things, because Jeff, Mike, and I kind of talked about this yesterday. That's one of the things that I'm going to work to prepare in advance of a following utilities committee meeting, to be able to evaluate where we are as far as on track for the utilities budgets based on enterprise budgets, based on what was passed at the beginning of the year, and then where our revenues are, and then where our cash flow will at least based on the available data, where we will end the year, to create a full picture of where we're potentially might end up by the end of 2021. Of course, that has to take into account certain guesses about water usage and sewer usage, but it might provide a little bit more clarity to where our utility is headed and where the enterprise accounts are headed.
Yeah, I mean, we really have an anomaly here because the budget is showing a deficit, and the reason we did the rate increases was that we were projecting deficits and that we knew we were going to need additional money to cover them. Now, this one, not really, it's the one data point, April 2021, that really is out of line with the rest. But we need to understand the whole picture here. It looks to me like recently until this last one, we've been flat. 1.3 million plus change, and now all of a sudden we're up at almost 1.6. We got to know what's causing that, and is that something that's going to happen all the time, or is it something that's a one-off situation? I had thought maybe it was the loan proceeds, but no, that wasn't it. So I think we just have to charge David and the engineers to go back into the numbers and explain what's going on here.
But let me chime in here a minute.
A rate increase go into effect because the bills were paid in April. So that April spike could be as a result of the rate increase the last rate increase that went into effect.
Correct.
Except for this, that the last rate increase was billed in April. So I don't think we would have gotten all of that money, and it wouldn't, and even the rate increase wouldn't account for that kind of an increase either.
It would play a part in it, but you're right, Mayor. It wouldn't be the entire explanation.
So
Hold on a minute.
Back into the numbers.
Can I say something here?
Yeah.
If we don't compare month to month, I mean, the chart doesn't really mean anything to us because, I mean, I'm sure in 2019, we had a spike in April, and we got to see the paths of those spikes, because we got 1.6 million now, but by the end of the year, we might be down to 1.1 million because of expenses. You got to keep them. If you're going to show months, year ends over there, you got to compare the month to the month before you get so you can get a chart that has some some planability. Right now, this doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, no, I agree, Alan. But the reality is, I mean, I've looked ahead of where we're going to end up with the expenses, everything that we have, and paying another $300,000. We're going to be high with opportunities to consider we're going to consider opportunities of spending additional capital to make improvements that maybe we are deferring. So I
Yeah,
think,
but without notes on where the cash went at that time period, it's kind of a crapshoot on where we stand between January, February, and March of this year compared to year end from 2020. You can't use this as any kind of a planning tool.
No,
We need to get the other data. I agree, Alan. And to Mike's point, I think the rate increases are going to have some effect. I think we may save a little bit of money because we've stopped some of the waste that we've been experiencing with the Sharon Road water main replacement. But to Mike's point also, part of the reason to raise the rates was not just to stop deficits, but also to put us in a position where we could have reserves to take care of needed repairs. Now, as we go through the CMON and then as we go through some additional work with Kevin Bell and the more sensitive equipment, and we'll find areas that need to be repaired, we will be spending some of that money. And that was part of the logic of the engineers to say the rate increase is necessary to increase reserves so you can take care of maintenance properly. So I think we get to several points that have been made, get more data, try to do a month-to-month comparison. Mike, it sounds like Mike's projected out and Jeff have projected out where they think we might be. The positive thing though that I see here is it does give the appearance we might be building reserves to a point where we can do more maintenance, and that more maintenance is necessary.
yes.
So I have a
We
question.
can stop increasing rates. Wouldn't that be great if we can stop increasing rates? That's what I'm hoping for.
So I have a question for Jeff. On the agenda, you have review rate increase schedule. Do you have the rate increase schedule before you?
I do.
And what does that say?
Well, the rate increase, there will be no additional rate increase, Marilyn, unless the council and committee approve it.
We do have one more rate increase passed in December of 2019, effective in January of 22.
But it's a 4%.
It's 4%, and then it's 4% on water and sewer.
Maybe we won't need it.
Was, David, let me ask you, was that is in concrete, that's in effect? I thought that was going to be optional come 2022.
No, these were passed December of 2019
Yes,
for water and sewer.
okay.
And as I recall, they are automatic rate increases.
That is correct, Marilyn.
Yeah,
Unless
so,
we pull
and
it
that's the
back.
information that we need to consider, Jeff, in terms of the schedule. We have a 4% going into effect for water and 4% going into effect for sewer, effective January 1, 2020. And then we had an additional 4% going into effect, effective January 1, 2021.
Well, if I may, it was not 4%. It was a percentage increase on the base, but if you use more than the base, you paid more than 4%, because the base or the added unit went from $4.30 per added unit to $6.30 per added unit to this last billing to $8.30 per added unit. So that the increase for those who only use a minimum, and if you'll scroll down, David, for me, please. I think that's the next slide. Taking a look at that, that is a distribution chart, and that is the result of 4,000 reads. That is one read of each meter 4 times a year. And if you look at that graph, you'll see that the 1, 2, 3, the 4 columns on the left side are the number of reads that were 10 or less. So those people got a 3% increase. Whoever, each reading, not necessarily per person, per household, but each reading had a 3% increase, but everyone from the 10 or from the fourth column right paid substantially more than 3%. So it is that 65% of the residents who are aware of the rate increase and more sensitive to it, and why it is necessary, I think, that we monitor it closely and at the earliest opportunity show that we can make adjustments that will reduce the cost to the individuals. And that will be because we have less lost water, because we are billed differently, because we might look at adding some costs to large users like every other village does in their rate structure.
So let me provide the rate increase data passed in 2019 that will be going into effect in 2022.
Yes.
For water, there will be a 4% increase to the base and volume charge rate. The new base rate will be $70.63 per quarter, and then $8.63 per 100 cubic feet. Then for sewer, the base rate will remain the same, and this is again in January of 2022. The base rate will remain the same at $114.64, and then the volume rate will be increased by 4% to $8.06 per 100 cubic feet.
And this, David, is stemming from that ordinance that council passed in December 2019?
2019-42 and 2019-43.
Yes.
Correct. So there is, I thought that there was no further increase after the increase which occurred in the April billing or March reading. And there is in fact an additional 4% next year.
Yes. And we did have an increase effective January, which
Correct.
would be seen in the bills people received in April.
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
I take it you guys, no comment, I'm sorry. I, for one, pay the water bills in my household, so I'm mindful of these things. But thank you, David.
Of course.
Let me voice the effect on a household that uses 5 additional units. On the graph you see on the screen now, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, there's no change other than that 4% increase to the base next year. But all of the other columns are going to pay more for any use that's above and beyond the minimum. And that includes many families of households with kids, etc. But the effect will be if they use 5 more units in 2021, or let's call it 2022, it will be $283 a quarter versus $275 or $255 a quarter last year. And that's a significant increase over the base charge. So, you know, what you pay at a minimum. My point is that in thinking about the residents who are 65% of them, we need to try to make the water as economical and equitably charged as possible. Enough said. Okay. I think we have no further comments.
Well, I'm just going to make my comment on this, which is, you know, and Jeff, you and I talked about this the other day. and Mike, I think we did too, that we've never found a truly fair way to apportion the billing for water.
Mhm.
And it's probably an insoluble problem because most of the costs of water and sewer are fixed costs.
Mhm.
So, you could make the argument that that being the case, the base rate should cover virtually everything and everyone should pay the same base rate or very close to it. Now, of course, we're not going to do that. So then we start to just go shades of gray down to how the balance between the base rate and and what you get from people who use more than the base. And the point is, we have to take in roughly the same amount of money unless we can find ways that Jeff has suggested quite properly, look for ways to close the gap between what we produce and what we bill, look for ways to reduce I&I so that some of our costs could go down. But at the end of the day, the same money has to come in, and it's just a question of who's going to pay it.
I understand. And if I may, as a resident and just looking at it simply, when you say that fixed costs is all we have to be concerned about, I think the fixed costs include salaries, for example, not just capital equipment, not just land, et cetera, because no matter what, the salaries, the staff that brings us the water, it has to be paid. And that simply increases over time. And so as I said to you, Don, the residents agreed some time ago to divide the base cost equitably and then some charge for additional use. Well, that base cost has grown bigger over the years, and those who use only the minimum or less then have not faced any increase. Therefore, any additional cost to that base over a time is shared only with those who use more, and those who use more are paying substantially more this year than they paid 2 years ago, from $4.30 to $8.30.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And maybe what we should be doing is somehow looking at the money we collect from the base users and the money we collect from everybody else. And just seeing where does is there a balance that we're looking for there?
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe there's a point where we would say, well, the base user should always pay at least 40% of the cost. I just pulled that number out of my head. I don't know where it is, what it should be. And the rest would fall on the overusers, who would also be paying the base too. But
yeah. Well, there's also the potential, and this would take I say this knowing full well who might bear the majority of the work on this, but a measure to evaluate where the minimum sits. Because if the minimum is increased, and I don't know what other communities use for their minimums, but if the minimum is increased, and using not our current rate structure as an example, because we would have to evaluate where that would fall. But if we were able to encompass a larger percentage of our user base with a higher minimum, then that might allow us to pass off costs so that our minimum users, which would encompass, based on this graph anyway, anywhere from I would say up to 15, before you start getting into the heavier users, before it drops off significantly and you hit 17 and a half, that would, to go 15 and under, would capture a much larger percentage of the village than the current 10 does. But that's sort of like a brainstorm idea to see if there's potential for adjustment that way, so that we bank your usage is going to be higher. And we adjusted our rates to indicate that, you get more for your money based on paying the base rate.
Well, if you're looking for a balance, and if you're looking for a
Mhm.
balance point, you can get there one of two ways. You can either increase your base or change your base,
Mhm.
or you can change your rate.
Yes.
And, you know, but at the end of the day, the total amount of money coming in has got to be roughly the same.
You have to be, yeah, exactly.
Agreed. And I'm simply saying that I'm happy to stay under the base, no matter what the cost of operation does going up. It can double as long as I only have to pay my $67.91 and don't use any more than 10 units of water. So
Yeah, just a question for, I think, Jeff and David. Is there potential to benchmark how do other communities that are similar to us manage this? I mean, I know, Greater Cincinnati has their process. Trying to understand, is there a model that might be of interest to Glendale that we could use, that could be a representation of maybe a proposal?
Well, the rub is that you're talking about communities similar to us, and unfortunately, there aren't many. You've got your Lockland, you've got potentially your Wyoming, but their rates are fairly high. We can start with those numbers, but we would ultimately need to come up with a scenario that works specifically for Glendale, and for our type of user, and that being mainly residential or almost entirely residential, and on the closer to the minimum than like a Greater Cincinnati Waterworks or even a Norwood style community
Sure.
might be.
No, fully
Good
understand that.
Good starting point.
one of the downsides of our current pricing structure is that come the summer and people are watering lawns, pools, kiddie pools, etc., washing cars, some are going to hesitate to say, it's 8.5 per unit. I'm not going to use as many units, and so we'll sell less. And the net effect then could potentially mean that we don't generate as much revenue as we anticipated. Okay, we kicked it around a lot. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that at some point I made sense. And by the way, I want to apologize for that graph. I while we were talking, I was trying to get back to the graph and see what I did and to correct it. I haven't done so yet. I can forward that to you when after the meeting sometime. Okay, moving on the agenda, then we've gone through the financials here and the potential modification of rate increase. So I mentioned financial reporting. We have requested in the past meetings that we have some clarity, some more detail, that someone who's not does not have a great deal of financial acumen have more business-like reports that are like a P&L. And David has already started that process, as evidenced on the website. We'd like to see when it's possible, once he's able to catch up, that we see a monthly report as opposed to the existing. I'm speaking of the enterprise, of course, of the general fund as well, to see what's happening each month. I guess in the enterprise, it's not as there's not as much volatility as there is in the general, but it would be nice to see each month where we stand financially as I look at my checkbook at home. And thank you, David, for what you've done so far.
Sure.
Do we have any further comments from the committee or the group here? If not, are there anyone, has anyone?
Jeff?
Yes.
Jeff, yes, before you open it up for public comments, I'd like, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear from David I think he was the most knowledgeable who spoke about the Hedgewater Avenue Stormwater project that he spoke of at the Finance Committee. And in as much as that is a stormwater project, can you just walk us through it again in light of the first aspect being a study? Because I may be confusing the CMOM study with the Hedgerow Avenue Stormwater Project study.
Okay. So the stormwater project firstly is outside of enterprise. It's something handled by the general fund and by the streets committee and through that process. Now, as far as the CMOM project is concerned, the GIS mapping and locating will include our stormwater lines, but that's the last thing that they're looking for. They're looking at water and sewer primarily. They will be locating our stormwater lines, but their focus is water. Our focus in that is water and sewer. The study related to the Hedgerow Albion Stormwater Management Project would be a process that we would undertake with Kleinger's rather than EES to put together a study of the watershed in that Hedgerow Albion alt area of the village and evaluate stormwater in conjunction with the proposed underground stormwater project that the village has unfortunately repeatedly applied and been denied funding for through SCIP. So that with the American Rescue Plan funding that we're anticipating receiving this year and next would be covered by that project. So that stormwater project study would be included under the American Rescue Plan funding, and it would be isolated from the CMOM project.
Can I ask that the Utilities Committee be given updates on this project? I understand, I hear you, I'm not quite clear, but I do hear you saying that the Streets Committee is shepherding this project, this Hedgerow Avenue Stormwater project, which of course entails the flow of stormwater, both on surface and infiltrating our system.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask that the Utilities Committee be given some updates on this so that we are not out of the loop and can monitor what's going on, and the left hand in short knows what the right hand is doing.
Oh,
Because when
absolutely.
it comes down to water flowing from whatever source into this creek, it doesn't matter which committee is shepherding it. It matters what's being done, how it's impacting the residents, how it's impacting the village, and where we're coming out with this.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Thank you.
Entirely.
Thank you.
David, I think we'll also, as that proceeds, it does fall under street and public works. But it's you, it's Tom Alderfer. It will probably involve Kevin Bell to a certain extent.
Mhm.
But as that progresses, it'll also come before council as things proceed. So
Absolutely.
And that's what I was asking. I'd rather be informed before it comes to council.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm asking, Mike, that the Utilities Committee be kept abreast before all of this comes to council in one lump sum.
And we because this project is going to be a little bit further off into 21 than the Sharon Road Avenue repave. Sharon Road Avenue is bid ready. That's going to proceed. That process is going to proceed before the stormwater project. So I will certainly be making updates available well before we come to council and say, we need this much money, and go from there. So yeah, we'll certainly keep both committees, streets and utilities, updated on this project as it proceeds.
Thank you. Needless to say, I have a keen interest in this project.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah. Having served on the Utilities Committee for a couple of years now, and heard from the residents on Albion and Hedgerow and Warwick, I do have a keen interest in this project. Thanks.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak from the public?
I have Gordon as an attendee. I'm not sure if he's looking to speak or just participating. Would you like me to promote him or wait for him to raise his hand?
If he'd like to speak and he raises his hand, I would guess. Huh?
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just, since it's just him, we'll allow him to talk and see if he has anything to add.
Okay.
Going once.
He's on mute.
Yeah, I've asked him to unmute. Hopefully that goes through.
Yeah.
Might be having a coffee break.
He's on, he's still on, there he is.
I'm sorry, I had to step away for a minute to do something in the yard. Just walked back in. Is the floor mine?
It is.
But I didn't see anything on there that, unless there was something that was discussed after the extensive discussion on water rates. The only thing I'll add is that I have some wonderful pictures that will match the spikes on Jeff's chart, showing the significant rainfall events up here. I don't know if it has any bearing on the usage, but I found it interesting that when I looked back through my pictures, they almost match exactly every single peak on that chart. So I don't know who would like the honor of having those pictures, but I think they exist elsewhere in the village archives. But
And Gordon, this is Marilyn. Thank you for joining us. You did miss the discussion of the Hedgerow Avenue Stormwater project.
oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were going to just talk about water rates.
Yeah, no, and so perhaps you can listen towards the end of the video when it's available and catch up on that conversation. I'm quite sure that will be something of interest to the residents on Hedgerow and Albion below the hill.
So I apologize. I didn't realize I didn't see it on the agenda. So has there been any change since the last discussions that I saw publicly? Basically that the American Rescue and Recovery Act is going to be used to fund the
Gordon,
That's where we are.
it's still on track. I think the only thing different that was discussed today is that Maryland is correctly requested that all committees, especially utility committee, be kept up to speed as that project unfolds and moves forward.
okay. Yeah, and the only other thing I will add is that I think probably in the last 90 days or so, we've really not had any significant rainfall events. Looking at the chart that Jeff had there at the beginning, showing those spikes, we haven't had any rainfall events like that to speak of. I haven't tracked what the annual rainfall is in the area, but we've had rain, but it's been very slow, kind of spreading. We haven't had the typical spring downfalls that we see. It does appear that they're pretty well finished across the street with things. I haven't ventured over there to see, if they've uncovered the grates and the things like that will allow them to test the system as they indicated they would, but it does appear they're about ready to finish up on the project. And I'll have to say it looks kind of nice, so.
Thank you, Gordon. If we may, let's move on then.
Okay.
I
Thank you,
also saw the grates on the streets and the grates look very nice, which reminded me of the stormwater project and piqued my interest in this even more. I'd like to know if the grates will work efficiently, Gordon, and so we'd appreciate hearing from you and Dan and the others.
Thank you. Do I hear no further comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
There we are. Thank you,
Second.
Paul, for tolerating me, and
Alrighty.
we'll see you soon.
All
Thanks.
right, good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, goodbye now.